They continued to grant journalists and technicians, many from foreign nations, high-level security access based on falsified documents and incomplete background checks, phony names, phony social security numbers. Times have changed, and it's still doing 1990s-style television in a world where people are getting their information right here on their smartphones. It's in the back pocket.
Did you conduct or review a written analysis before placing most of the USAGM's and VOA's employees on administrative leave on March 15th, before cutting off payments to USAGM grantees in March, or before announcing a reduction in force at the VOA last Friday? Yes or no?
I've been working in media for 30 years, and in every newsroom across this country in that time.
Yes or no? Did you do?
These are complex questions. They're not yes or no questions.
It's either you did a review or you didn't.
We are right-sizing an agency that has grown and grown and grown.
Did you do a review?
We've reviewed. Yes, we've reviewed.
You've done a review. Do you have a record of what you reviewed?
We have. No. These are ridiculous questions.
Did you serve? Simple answers. You either did or you didn't.
Yeah, I guess survey means talk to and ask questions.
Did you do it or not?
Sure, we did.
You did? Then you can provide those surveys. You can show us a record of who you talked to.
We did not run an expensive survey, but I've talked to many people at the state.
You didn't do that either. So this was based on a whim.
To terminate the contracts of at a time when it's needed more than ever. Cutting transmission feeds from the Middle East Broadcasting Network. It's resulted in 90%, those actions of yours, 90% of the staff being cut. Some of the people on Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty are furloughed. Programming's been reduced at a time when we need it the most. I'm concerned also, not just with the cuts, but I'm concerned for the journalists that report this news. They're in great jeopardy. A lot of attention in your opening remarks went to vetting and the extreme efforts that you're doing for vetting. I want to know what you're doing to protect those journalists. One just recently released the other day, after 4 years of detainment by the Russians, talked about the way he was tortured and physically abused and psychologically abused. These are journalists that are there. These are people trying to bring the word of democracy.
I just got to the agency 3 months ago, and what the question is,
I would like to know,
why are we hiring,
if I may, reclaiming my
why
time.
Are we
I'm
hiring
reclaiming
more
my time.
Americans?
I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. It's sort of like blaming the group that's advocating for these people. What are they doing? I'll tell you what they're doing. They've simply asked for a meeting with you.
It's hard to meet with somebody when they're suing you.
I have a letter that I'd like to ask unanimous consent be put in the record from the president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the president of Radio Free Asia, the president of Middle East Broadcasting Networks, dated April 30th, simply asking for some kind of communications or meeting with you regarding these issues of detainment. Radio fodder traffic surged 344%. The Instagram account, 62.5 million increases, a rise of 77%. These are things that are necessary, and you are cutting the agreements. Thank goodness the courts are saying no to you. But why would you ever want to do this here? Why do you better say, I want to know what Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty is doing to protect the journalists, when the U.S. and you have a role in doing it, and you won't even take a meeting from the people that want to meet and discuss the dangers to these journalists. I hope that you will take that meeting and we get a confirmation for you by the end of this hearing that you will meet them soon and discuss these issues. People's lives are in danger trying to tell the truth. I yield back.
If they would drop their malicious lawsuit, I'd be happy to meet with them, but it would be really stupid to meet with someone who's suing you. And, this is a gentleman who makes about $310,000, $320,000 off the backs of hardworking Americans and is suing our agency. We've given him all...
An official who's making money off the backs of Americans when we have a commander-in-chief making the money he's making. So I know that
President Donald Trump donates his salary back.
Chairman,
We've been asking to work with them negotiating a grant agreement, and they refuse. We offered a grant to them, and they refused to even mark it up and redline it and send it back to us. So we don't have an approved financial plan. They won't tell us where they're spending their money. We've got an audit going on right now, and they've stonewalled and prevented us from getting any access to their financial books. Again, we pay them, and they do not tell us where the money is going. I think that's a problem. I think the American people deserve to know where their money is going. And so we're working to make sure we get that. Interestingly, in the 11th hour last night, right before I crawled into bed, we found out that they're finally going to give a little bit of information to our auditors. I thought it was really interesting timing because they didn't want me to sit up here and say they refused to let us look at their books. They refused to let us see where the American taxpayer dollars are going.
Why should anyone believe that?
They shouldn't believe it, and I think this is why President Trump wants to eliminate the agency. The agency itself is not needed. It's proven that it does not know how to manage and does not know how to be respectful of this country and the American taxpayers' dollars. And so I think President Trump is absolutely right in eliminating this agency. We can roll in things that are valuable, that are worthwhile, bring it under the Department of State, where it once was, by the way, Voice of America, back when it was effective, back when many of you talk about the glory days of Voice of America, it was under the Department of State.
Okay, in the 21st century, we do need tools to combat the propaganda that our enemies are putting out there. We do need to hire the best folks. We do need to have all of that. Again, Ms. Lake, I'd love your commitment to work with this committee, work with Congress to enact those reforms and share the information and what you're thinking.
Absolutely. It would be wonderful to work with you and to effectuate the president's executive order to reduce this agency down in size so that it's lean, mean, and effective. And I think it is effective. We were able to get information out into and translated into Farsi as to what was happening. We were able to get President Trump's address translated live as it was happening. You don't need a massive staff. This is the only newsroom in the world that hasn't seen cutbacks because we don't need to have massive newsrooms.
Again,
15,000
right now, what I worry about, though, is we've let go of all this staff, and it isn't happening, and it's only happening.
We haven't let go of all the staff, actually.
Gentleman's time has expired.
By the way, can I just mention something? I want to show you the newsroom, one of the newsrooms over at VOA. I don't know if you can see this. Empty. It's kind of a Where's Waldo. Can you spot the one person in there?
Not from here.
One person in the newsroom. And I know you're probably saying, yeah, thanks a lot, Kari. No, this was actually back during the Biden administration. I didn't hear any complaints coming from anybody when nobody was showing up for work at VOA, when one person was showing up in the middle of the week.
You know, radio free is not free. And I was just thinking about this in my office the other day, and I was like, what's the most common media in America on the radio? I think it's iHeartRadio, iHeartMedia. The entire budget for iHeartMedia across the breadth of the United States of America and the globe is $90 million.
Wow.
That's the entire breadth. For Radio Free Europe, $150 million, significantly more than all of iHeartMedia. For Radio Free Asia, $70 million. For Middle East Broadcasting, $103 million. You think of all of those individually, and you compare that to iHeartMedia across America, and you look at the reach of that. I just think it's an interesting note as we point out the need to downsize the size and scope of what's going on in USAGM.
And that Ms. Lake has not spent a single minute with us or our senior team. She has not visited our office or inspected our operations. And so with this letter that we have here that clearly says it, I also want to bring to your attention where it says also that they're still open to meeting with you. And I know now you're saying you can't meet with them, but I want to get more clarification. Within the 2 weeks that you were in your position, that you declared that it was, you said specifically that's largely incompetent, corrupt, biased, and a threat to America's national security. What were the procedures in place for you to make that determination? Specifically, how much staff was actually allocated to do that investigation to help you come to that conclusion?
Well, we've got reports. We've got years of biased reporting. We have misused funds.
Could you tell me about the step or the mechanisms that you used? How much staff was provided to look into it in those 2 weeks to get to that?
How much staff is what?
How much staff? Like, what was your mechanisms in actually going through coming to this conclusion within 2 weeks?
Within 2 weeks, I assessed all of the grant agreements, and I realized that these grant agreements had been changed during the Biden administration to take out any form of transparency. During the first Trump administration, the grant agreements were written where we had transparency, we could see what was being spent, and during the Biden administration, they took all of that transparency out.
And before the lawsuit was filed and these letters were sent, was there anybody who went to them to ask questions and hold them accountable?
It's really hard to have open communication when you're being sued.
Well, before that, because we have letters back until April. This one was in June. So before any lawsuits were filed, were there any attempts to have that communication?
I believe when I first got there, they reached out to me. I had just gotten in the building and said, we'd like to meet. And before I even had the chance to clear my schedule and meet with them, they launched into malicious lawsuits. So no, we haven't met with them.
Versus adversely hurting us and creating a vacuum in which any other group can come in and put out propaganda. And we know there's a lot of propaganda, especially coming from the internet. So I want to make sure that we actually have a plan in place, there's funding in place, or that there are matrices in place to determine that this lean creation of a machine is actually working for us and not against us.
That's what our goal is. We want to make sure any information going out is not anti-American, is not pro-CCP.
So if there is a matrices, could you please provide it to us so we could be on the same page?
Ms. Lake, your new role requires you to tell the truth. For decades, whenever authoritarians and dictators suppressed the people and claimed victory in fraudulent elections, Voice of America countered those lies. I can't imagine how people fighting for democracy today and around the world can trust someone who has so shamelessly lied about her own election.
Well, the gentleman was sworn in at USAGM on March 3rd, and it became clear in the following weeks, today you said in days, that reform was not possible. They missed your premise. Reform's not possible. You figured that out in days. When asked what review you had done of this very large agency, you had no answer.
I do have an answer.
Excuse me, this is my time. You'll wait for my questions. You then went on to say, this is filled with a bloated staff who hates America. You have been holding up photographs after photographs, including the image of the President of the United States. I feel like I am suffering through a propaganda war through your testimony. So I can see why the other side of the aisle, which is now not here, was utterly confused and congratulating you for wanting to reform this agency. No, because here's what you said. And I'm a former professor of writing. I'm somebody who is really skeptical of euphemism. You've said over and over again, you just want to reduce it to its statutory minimum. And then you said, and that it will be gone by 2026. You want it gone. The president wants it gone by 2026. I ask unanimous consent to enter onto the record this article: Moscow and Beijing rejoice at the looming death of Radio Free Europe, VOA. I ask unanimous consent. Thank you, Chair. No, that is not for you to speak to. That's what we do here. This article: Chinese propaganda surges as the U.S. defunds Radio Asia. I ask unanimous consent. Our adversaries are delighted with your plan, delighted that you'll be stripping this thing out. And I'm puzzled. My question really today is for Republican members. Think of the vaunted VOA. I have had the opportunity to visit VOA and many of the journalists who have worked at VOA. It is something that this country has been very proud of. And yet in your beginning testimony, you talked about, oh my goodness, USAGM, quote, hires a large number of foreign nationals, including from countries hostile to America, and uses J-1 visas as a shadow jobs and backdoor immigration program. Number one, again, propaganda, misinformation, J-1 visas are non-immigrant visas. Number two, and this is just a question of logic and basic understanding. Think about it. Many of the journalists who report through these supported networks are native to the countries in which it is critical to transmit accurate, factual, and legal, linguistically fluent information. Of course, they should be hired. But you use as though that's a bad thing. Large number of foreign nationals, as though there's some other, as though there's a reason to demonize them. Foreign national journalists who actually understand what's going on.
We should hire American.
You know what? Voice of America is not only about talking about America, it's about reporting on the world. And millions of people for decades have relied upon it. So for those of you who think this was about reform, it's not. It's about shutting down media. If you really wanted to reform it, if you really thought there were places to change, and I'm sure there are places to improve, then you would have spent more than a few days and come to a more serious conclusion. That's my worry about you in this position. You're just not serious about it. You are a propaganda machine for the Trump administration. It is an incompetent review that you have completed. Well, actually, you didn't complete it. It sounds like you never even started it. You didn't interview anybody. You've never run an agency like this. You're a former journalist, apparently, allegedly. Although I don't trust your journalistic integrity when you hold up a single picture of a newsroom at a single moment in time and think that reveals anything. It reveals nothing. It's evidence of nothing. I don't know if they all just went to lunch. Who knows what that's a picture of?
You ever
Your
worked in a
journalistic
newsroom?
integrity, I've been to many newsrooms. Your journalistic integrity is shot.
You talk about, you talk about me being upset that we're hiring foreign nationals.
Madam Chairwoman, I really am not asking for any response, so I would ask that this stop. I don't know whose time she is on.
Ability, bombs are powerful. Truth is more powerful. Taking the bombs away from our military would be bad. Taking truth away from our public diplomacy efforts is worse. I yield back.